The courtroom was steeped in stunned silence as the judge delivered a verdict that would forever reshape the legacy of Cesar Millan, once celebrated around the globe as the dog whisperer. After months of intense legal proceedings, Millan, who had risen from modest beginnings in rural Mexico to become the world's most recognized dog trainer, was finally forced to confront the consequences of his controversial training methods. As the judge's gavel struck with finality, Millan's posture sagged, his trademark confidence visibly faltering before the eyes of both his devoted supporters and staunch critics. For years, he had dominated television screens with the dog whisperer, captivating millions with a philosophy rooted in dominance and the assertion of pack leadership. His methods earned him international fame and a fortune estimated in the tens of millions. However, as the field of behavioral science advanced and the dog training industry gradually shifted toward more humane, positive reinforcement techniques, Millan's approach came under increasing scrutiny. A growing chorus of animal behaviorists, veterinarians, and welfare organizations began to question his methods, labeling them as outdated and potentially harmful. The case had been years in the making. Former clients stepped forward, alleging that their dogs had experienced emotional and psychological trauma under Millan's care. The prosecution presented incriminating video clips, many taken from his own show, that, when re-evaluated through the lens of contemporary behavioral science, depicted not breakthroughs but distress. What had once appeared to be miraculous transformations were now understood to be signs of fear, submission, and learned helplessness. Expert witnesses testified that Millan's training techniques subjected animals to unnecessary stress and anxiety, undermining the very well-being he claimed to support. The defendant has knowingly continued practices that cause distress to animals. Despite overwhelming scientific evidence against such methods, the judge declared sternly, "This court finds it necessary to send a clear message to the industry and the public about the standard of care we expect for animals in our society." The consequences were severe. Millan's Dog Psychology Center was permanently shut down, he faced substantial financial penalties, and he was barred from professionally training animals ever again. Yet perhaps the most devastating blow came in the form of a court-ordered public statement, compelling Millan to acknowledge that many of his once-promoted methods were now considered harmful by today's scientific standards. Deemed outdated and potentially harmful by the scientific community, Cesar Millan's dog training empire crumbled in a matter of minutes. In the wake of the judge's verdict, a legacy built over 2 decades was swiftly dismantled. Outside the courthouse, scenes of chaos unfolded. Heartbroken fans wept openly, clutching photographs of their dogs, animals they believed Millan had saved. In stark contrast, animal rights activists erupted in celebration, calling the ruling a long-overdue victory for the voiceless. Within the dog training world, industry professionals hailed the decision as a turning point that would further the adoption of humane, science-based training methods. For Millan, the ruling signified far more than professional ruin, it was the unraveling of his very identity. Born in rural Mexico, he had once crossed the border illegally with just $100 in his pocket, fueled by an unwavering dream to become the world's greatest dog trainer. His transformation from a homeless immigrant to an international celebrity embodied the quintessential American success story. Dogs weren't just his passion, they were his salvation, his life's purpose, and, ultimately, the source of his downfall. Behind the charismatic, confident persona he projected on television, Millan carried deep personal wounds that many of his fans never saw. In 2010, he endured 2 profound losses, the death of his beloved pit bull, Daddy, and the end of his 16-year marriage. These events left him emotionally shattered and financially strained. In the depths of despair, he attempted to take his own life by overdosing on pills. Though he survived and gradually rebuilt his career, those closest to him believed he never fully recovered from those personal traumas. Cesar tied his entire identity to being the dog whisperer, said a former associate who spoke on the condition of anonymity. When science and public opinion began to turn against his methods, he couldn't adapt, because admitting change would mean acknowledging that the foundation of his life's work was flawed. That resistance to change, they added, ultimately led to his downfall. The case that ended Millan's career wasn't sparked by a single misstep, but rather a long-standing pattern of behavior. The tipping point came when an episode of Cesar 9/11 aired, showing a dog under his supervision attacking a pig during a training session. The footage went viral, provoking widespread outrage and prompting more than 10,000 people to sign a petition demanding the show's cancellation. Although Millan was eventually cleared of animal cruelty in that particular incident, the controversy opened the floodgates. Former clients began coming forward, sharing disturbing accounts of their own experiences with his training practices. Among the many troubling accounts presented during the case, one family claimed their dog developed severe anxiety after undergoing Cesar Millan's controversial flooding technique, an approach that forces animals to confront their fears without a chance to retreat. Another family reported that their pet suffered physical injuries at Millan's dog psychology center after being made to run on a treadmill while restrained by a choke collar. As more allegations surfaced, so too did the chorus of scientific criticism surrounding his methods. What we discovered about dog cognition and emotional well-being over the past decade has completely changed the landscape of dog training, testified Dr. Eleanor Williams, a veterinary behaviorist. Methods based on dominance theory and coercion are not only outdated, they can actually trigger or worsen behavioral issues. The science is clear. Despite the mounting evidence and professional consensus, Millan remained defiant. He insisted that critics misunderstood his approach or were misrepresenting his intentions. But as the weight of testimony, research, and public opinion turned against him, his defense began to unravel. His unwillingness to evolve alongside scientific progress ultimately sealed his downfall. As Millan slipped out of the courthouse through a side entrance to avoid the media storm, the dog training industry was already beginning to reckon with the ripple effects of his collapse. Experts predicted that the verdict would further accelerate the shift toward positive reinforcement, a movement that had been gaining traction for years. Training schools that once embraced Millan's dominance-based philosophy began rebranding themselves with terms like science-based and force-free, deliberately distancing themselves from his techniques. The collapse of Millan's business empire was swift. His publisher cancelled his forthcoming book, television networks across multiple countries pulled reruns of his shows, and companies that once profited from products bearing his name severed ties. What had taken decades to build came crashing down in just a matter of days. For his most devoted followers, Millan's fall from grace was difficult to process. Online forums buzzed with emotional debates. While some refused to accept the evidence, clinging to the belief that he had been wrongfully targeted, others reluctantly acknowledged that they may have been misled. Many shared personal stories of using his training methods, unaware of the potential harm they might be causing. "I thought I was doing the right thing for my dog," one former fan wrote on social media. "I trusted Cesar completely. Now I have to face the fact that I was wrong, and that I may have unknowingly caused my dog stress by following outdated methods." It's heartbreaking. Cesar Millan's dramatic fall marks the end of an era in dog training. His rise from undocumented immigrant to international celebrity once epitomized the American dream. But in the face of evolving scientific standards and a more informed public, the flaws in his approach were laid bare. As the industry continues to embrace evidence-based, humane training that prioritizes the emotional health of animals, Millan's story serves as a powerful cautionary tale. Stripped of the career that once defined him, Millan now faces an uncertain future. Once the calm, assertive figure who commanded millions, he must now reckon with a world that has moved on from his methods. The question that remains is this: what will be the lasting impact of Cesar Millan's controversial legacy? While his techniques may fade into history, the conversation sparked by his downfall about how we train and care for our animal companions may prove to be his most enduring contribution. So what do you think? Was the verdict against Cesar Millan justified, or was he unfairly targeted? Have his methods influenced the way you train your own dogs? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more thought-provoking discussions on the people and controversies shaping our world.